Today is Monday, August 26, 2024. This is episode 144 of the Tech Jawn from Columbus, Ohio. I'm Robb Dunewood.
And coming out of Philly, it's your girl Tech Life Steph back in the building.
And out of Atlanta, this is Terrance Gaines, aka Brother Tech, aka I'm looking for a new job because I cannot afford my car insurance now that I have to put my 16-year-old daughter on my insurance. So I need a new job just to cover the insurance costs that's going to go with
It must be
adding her
wiping you
on
out because you AKA'd car insurance 2 weeks in a row. So
Did I?
I know I know you're feeling it. Yeah.
Well, last week I said, I'm pretty sure it's going to be high. This week I can't confirm that the car insurance
high
is
AF.
going to be high. And that ain't including, let's just say we decide to get her a car, in the next year or two. My mind can't even fathom how much that's going to run up the insurance. But just adding her on our insurance is at least $1,000 more expensive. And that's every 6 months. That ain't, a year.
Listen, God bless you.
So yeah, I'm gonna need to kick off this remote work. Find me a part-time job just to cover this insurance, Jack.
So you know what? I don't even have this in our rundown, but it makes me want to ask this question. I don't know if either of you have heard this, but the driverless taxi company Waymo, they are trying something where I believe they're calling it Waymo Teen. And what they want to do is give teenagers the ability to book Waymo rides in these driverless taxis. And the teen's account has to be hooked up to their parent or guardian. And what I guess the way that it works is that when the guardian will get an alert to say, do you accept this ride, for this minor? And if they say yes, then they'll actually get like telemetry on their phone where they can see where the car is at all times and make sure that that their child or the minor gets to where they need to get. But would either of you trust that at this point?
Well, they do that with Uber and Lyft to where there's Uber Teens to where it's kind of the same thing. It's just a driver in there. Probably not. Not at this stage. I would rather just schlep it and put on my flip flops and drive them around.
Go get your kid or go pick
them
them up or whatever. Right. Yeah, I don't know that I would trust something
so
like that
here's
either.
The question: is the trust about you not trusting people, or you just don't trust the technology yet?
All of the above.
Well, both.
The kid, the people, the technology.
You got some suspect Uber drivers, and you got Waymo cars that don't know how to pull into a parking lot without waking up the neighbors at 4 a.m. in the morning. I don't know if y'all heard that story about all those Waymo cars at the end of the night. They're supposed to pull into this depot, which is just a fancy parking lot.
Mm-hmm.
They file in their single file. And if the first car can't park directly, that kind of messes up the second car. So the residents in the area are calling and complaining because all of these Waymo cars don't know how to park. And to fix it, they just honk their horn, just blaring the horn. So imagine a couple dozen plus cars, right? All horns and you go into the parking lot. Nobody's there because it's all autonomous, but these cars sitting there confused and blaring their horns. So, of course, that has nothing to do with driving my kid around, but y'all can't fix that.
Yeah, that's So, because I was wondering, it's like, because
too many points of failure with that.
Yeah, it's it's going to be a thing. There's no question that this is going to be a thing at some point. And at some point, people are going to say, I can't believe you let just random strangers drive your children around before. And times are going to change, but it's insurance. That's 200, and I think the Waymo Teen is like $250 a month, and it gets you 16 rides. So that's a little bit more expensive than the car insurance, but it also includes the transportation back and forth to wherever it is you're going. So
right, and I'm assuming car insurance is because everything else is up. I'm hoping, or I'm expecting it to come back down to earth a little bit, depending on how this election goes and the Feds doing their interest rates or whatever they're planning on doing. I'm hoping that it'll come back down. But of course, these companies, it ain't never going to get back down to where it was.
No. And it's a shame. I think John Henry, that is with Harlem Capital, had started an insurance startup called the Loop, I believe was the name of it. They were only licensed in Texas, but it was like based off of a whole bunch of different factors. The algorithm took in, a whole lot more different factors into your rate, that was supposed to make it more affordable for more people. But I think they ended up not getting the next round of funding they were looking for and had to shut it down. But
Oh man, the website is still up. It's called
is it?
ridewithloop.com.
Okay, well maybe they found some
Affordable,
money.
yeah,
Yeah.
affordable car insurance for underserved communities.
Yeah, that was like the
Mm.
whole thing. But like I said, I don't know if they expanded. I know when they launched, they were only in Texas,
And that's
and
probably the
looking
case.
to expand to the rest of the country. But it seemed like a really good idea and a really good way for people to get insurance that they could afford. So hopefully they can still make that work.
Yeah, but I'm pretty sure it's just in Texas because when I was calling around getting insurance quotes, not all of these car insurance companies operated in every single state. You assume Progressive, Allstate,
Mhm.
Geico, Liberty, all the fancy ones on TV, you would assume they're in 50 states. Not the case.
Mm-mm.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I had to do some alternative looking to find some other car insurance companies that I'd never heard of because there was only like a handful of the major ones that I could actually select from.
Yeah.
And because they saw my kid coming in, it was like, nah, we
Right.
don't insure 16-year-olds. No,
Yeah,
Right.
thank you.
They're like, we good.
Yeah.
We got enough
yeah,
money.
it's crazy. It's like, just since we're on the topic of insurance, it's like you now see where there are insurance companies that are pulling out of states, not for automobiles, but for home insurance. They're saying that
Mhm.
y'all got too many floods, y'all got too many wildfires, you got too many tornadoes, you have too many natural disastrous acts that happen where you are. And
We're
when
not an insurance company. We're a profit making company. How
exactly,
dare
it's
That's
you?
like,
it.
How
Right.
dare you
Right.
ask us for the money that you've been putting into this policy? How dare you?
Right.
right. But what they,
Actually have to file a claim.
insurance companies have really, really good math departments, and they figure out that, what, based off of this area, the number of claims that we are having to shell out for, it would be cost advantageous for us to just not support anyone in this area than it would to take these people's money, because we're
That's
not.
why actuaries make $175,000 a year. Actuaries make a lot of money for that very reason.
Mhm. So, and that's a tech job too. So we should talk about actuaries on this show at one point. But
Mhm.
let's get into the tech, because y'all, there was a lot of it. Steph, I believe you threw this story in here about what's happening with the CEO and founder of Telegram.
Mhm.
And this one's kind of interesting. So for those who don't know what Telegram is like, well, it's not like, it is a cross-platform texting application. So you can do all kind of things in it. Its closest competitor probably would be WhatsApp, who is significantly larger, but it works like a WhatsApp. And what has happened here is that the CEO of this company has been arrested in France, and it's not necessarily that he did something. The founder's name is Pavel Durov. Why they arrested him is that France has been investigating some things that have been happening with kids, so like illegal transactions and possessing and distributing pornographic material and wire fraud and all this kind of stuff. But like WhatsApp, Telegram can be end-to-end encrypted. It's not by default, so they actually are a little more open than what a WhatsApp is. But they arrested the CEO and founder of the company, not because they think that he is doing something, but hey, the buck stops with you. We're not getting the information that we want. So they've gone and arrested him. So what are y'all's thoughts on that?
I mean, I'm kind of not mad at that because you do like forget section 230 and everything else. You do have a responsibility if you build a platform to ensure people's safety on that platform. And I put this story in there specifically because I had written previously about the idea of teen sextortion, which is a huge thing right now where
And say that one
people
more time.
teen sextortion. So
Okay.
extorting teens for sexually explicit imagery. So somebody will DM a teen, and it usually happens to teen boys, unfortunately, because I think they're a little more susceptible. But somebody will DM a teen boy posing as a young girl,
And sing your junk.
back and forth, send me a pic. Once they do, okay, okay, if you don't send me some money, I'm going to put this
Extortion.
picture
Got it.
on black. Yeah, so
Got it.
they call it sextortion. And there have been, kind of a rash of young male teen suicides
Mm.
behind this practice of sextortion, and Telegram in particular was one of the platforms that they cited in a lot of the articles that I used in the piece that I wrote, on how they do it. I mean, they literally have forums dedicated to handbooks, basically showing you what to say, exactly how to respond, how to make them, what pictures you can steal to make it look like you're this person, and just it did step-by-step instructions
Damn.
on how to get a young boy in this way. And it just is disgusting, and people are dying because of what is being allowed to happen on this platform. So somebody has to be held responsible for this. And if you can do anything, like this guy has refused to even hire moderators. And to your point,
Mhm.
Rob, they ain't even end-to-end encrypted. You know what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
you ain't even done the basic bare minimum things you could do to have some modicum of safety on your platform. That's your fault, and you should be held accountable for that.
Especially if he's getting the raises and he's getting the
The bonuses,
bonuses.
all that.
Mhm.
He's going globe trotting the globe globe trotting, promoting Telegram and sitting on these conferences and sitting on these panels, and everybody's looking at him and this company as an example of how you do this, that, and the third. All right, that's all good. Also,
Right. Right.
when things are going south, you are the dude we need to hold responsible. So it makes sense to me. Especially as something as serious as this, and like you mentioned, Stephanie, this dude's just unwillingness to just to do anything about it, and he's just
Right.
like, "All right, catch me if you can." Be like, "All right, well, gotcha."
Right. Exactly.
So the French agency that is going after them, it's kind of like, if we extrapolate to here, it would almost be like a special counsel. It's not necessarily the Department of Justice. It's someone that the Department of Justice has said, hey, you go figure this stuff out independently of us and everything else. That's kind of how this seems to be working here. But something happened after this. French President Emmanuel Macron says that Durov's arrest was in no way a political decision, but part of an ongoing judicial investigation. So long story short, you got the president of France that is essentially saying that it doesn't look as bad as it is. We are, this is an investigation that, it's been going on for over a month at this point. I thought that was interesting because can you imagine if something was going on here in the United States and the president of the United States is talking about a legal case? Depending on who the president is and what case he's talking about, folks would not be rolling with that at all. So
Right. Well, they tried to make it a free speech issue, and politicize it in that way, and it's not that. I mean, Europe does have a Digital Services Act, which is supposed to protect them from things like this. We have in my notes I wrote, could this be a catalyst for some sort of movement on Section 230? Because they already have something in place over there, again, with this Digital Services Act that does hold platforms accountable for the content posted on their platforms. We're trying to get there here. I don't know that we'll ever get here, but based on how this turns out, I think it could maybe provide some sort of precedent. I'm hoping anyway that it'll provide some sort of precedent for the United States to figure out how to get rid of Section 230 of the Communications and Decency Act, or whatever the thing is called. Whatever the thing is called. I should know this by now because we've been talking about Section 230 for
Right.
years at this point. But yeah, I'm hoping this may set some sort of precedent that we can use here to start holding platforms accountable for the stuff that we have to be exposed to.
So y'all, moving on to this next story. This one caught my eye. So I want to ask both of y'all, before you read the article, I don't know how much you pay attention to podcasting platforms, but if you just would have had to have guessed, what is the number one place or the number one way that people listen to podcasts? What would you have said?
Oh, it's probably Apple Podcasts as a one spot.
Yeah, I mean, what
I
about you,
probably
Seth?
would have said Spotify.
Okay, so those generally are 1 and 2. Apple and Spotify have been swapping, going back and forth for the past couple of years now. But this article just came out this past week, and Apple is now in third place. And believe it or not, YouTube is the number one. And it's not even really close. They are, they're 10% above. They're, in the United States, 31% of podcast listeners listen to podcasts on YouTube. And I want to be specific here. Podcast listeners listen to podcasts on YouTube. This is not just a podcast like we are an audio podcast, or we call ourselves an audio first podcast, but there's a video component that we put up on YouTube. Not talking about that alone. We're talking about actual audio only podcasts. 31% of people, that's where they go to listen. And I've been paying attention to this for a while, so I've kind of seen these numbers coming, but I didn't realize that Apple was dropping as precipitously as it has, because usually it was Apple, Spotify, 21%, 19%, 19%, 21%. There were a lot of organizations that weren't even looking at YouTube because they just felt it was something different. That really has changed like in the last year, 18 months. But Apple is now only 12%. So the numbers are 31% for YouTube, 21% for Spotify, 12% for Apple. And just reading the articles on this, Apple has been supporting podcasts going all the way back to 2005. Podcasts just became a thing in the end of 2004. So they've been supporting them almost from the beginning, and now they're in a distant third place.
Supporting, but treating them like an afterthought. You know what I mean? That's kind of what I got out of the article. It's something that is there, but they haven't really done the work to promote or highlight, or first of all, the separate podcast app is just the death knell. I mean, I listen to my podcast through Apple Podcasts, but I hate the fact that I have to open a separate app to do it. I mean, I think that's just insane to me.
A separate app as compared to what?
Like, if you go into Spotify, you can listen to podcasts inside Spotify.
Okay.
You don't have, there's a separate podcast app separate from Apple Music. Let me clarify. Okay. So Apple Music is one thing. Apple Podcast is a separate app. You have to go to a whole entirely separate app to listen to the podcast, which makes zero sense in 2024. And then they don't do ads. I'm like, what are you doing? What's the point of not, I'm gonna read it just to make sure that I am not missing this. Cause I was like, what's the point of having this platform at all if you're not going to monetize it with advertising? I think everybody kind of just expects that at this point. Right. And it's just like, what is the point of not doing that? I think the podcasts themselves can do it, sure, but Apple's not taking advantage of that. And I'm just like, so what are you even doing this for?
Well, Apple has long not fought against, but is one of the last platforms to say, all right, we're going to put ads on this thing. You think about Apple Podcasts, you think about the App Store, you think about all these different platforms that Apple Music, right? Apple Music, I don't think has ads.
It doesn't.
Right.
Which I love, but it's crazy.
So to that point, Apple has been kind of quote unquote dragging its feet. I am in favor of no ads on Apple, but I get it. It's a company. You got to make money. And these are untapped verticals: podcasts, music, App Store, Apple TV, no ads on Apple TV Plus. So it's an untapped vertical for Apple to say, all right, let's get a little bit more of that money. But I'm in favor of, either way, it's like, I ain't tripping, right? Another thing that you mentioned, Stephanie, is I think I've never been on Spotify like that. And the times I've been on Spotify, if I recall, I remember going to Spotify.com and being able to listen to Spotify and sign in and listen to podcasts. I can go to YouTube.com, listen to podcasts, listen to music. You know what I couldn't do up until like last week? Go to ApplePodcasts.com and listen to podcasts. Apple just last week launched podcasts.apple.com to where a regular
in a web browser.
A web browser. Yeah. They just recently been able to log in, and maybe that's because, Rob, that they've now lost. They're only
Right.
13% of the market because of those reasons. So Apple's like, all right, well, we got to fix that. So they launched podcast.apple.com to similar to like YouTube, similar to Spotify, I think. You can go on the web. You don't need an Apple device. You don't need a podcast account. You don't need an Apple ID. Go to podcast.apple.com, listen to podcasts, and then I guess sign in if you want to save them and whatever the case may be. So Apple knows that
Right.
they are lagging.
It's like, stop treating podcasts like an afterthought. Like, it's a
Right.
huge industry. I don't know of any people. I don't know that they're doing anything like, and y'all can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't know if they've offered any Joe Rogan-esque deals to anybody to host podcasts on their platforms, to host, Apple specific exclusive content on their platforms at all, which again, like I said, you're just treating the whole genre as an afterthought. And
We'll be
now
the
you're
aggregator. Basically, they're just an aggregator.
Yeah.
So
You just get it on our platform and you can look at some statistics, and that's about it.
So being the non-Apple person on the show, I have rather liked Apple Podcasts going back into iTunes in the way that Apple does it, for the reasons that there's no ads. And Apple clearly, it never looked like they were trying to monetize podcasting. It's like, we have a lot of people who like to listen to podcasts. Let's make that available to them on our platform, and let's make it relatively easy for people to add their podcast to our platform. But it looks like what has started to happen is that, number one, we because we're in the United States, we tend to think that Apple is like this massive company, which they are. I mean, they often are the biggest company in the world. They're not right now. I think they're number 3, maybe number 4, but they're a massive company and they sell a whole heck of a lot of phones. But Android still dominates Earth as far as the number of phones that are out there. And most people listen to podcasts on mobile devices. That's still the number one way that most people consume, is on their mobile device. So if you have 70% of mobile devices can't run your podcast app, or until, as you said, Terrance, last week, couldn't even pull it up in a web browser, then they've got to go do something else. And podcasting is continuing to get big, not just here, but everywhere. So you're seeing other ways to get on that are, to get on and listen, are kind of coming to the forefront. And I started to see this with what's happening with Google and with YouTube in the last probably 2 years, when I would just see this reports, man, there's like a whole lot of folks who are actually listening to podcasts. As I said, not watching podcasts, but listening to podcasts on YouTube. This is before YouTube Music earlier this year actually added podcasts to the platform. This was just people just going to YouTube or running the YouTube app on their phones and just listening to podcasts, because everything I want's there. It's easy to search. It's easy to find. A problem that podcasts have always had is discovery. And it was always interesting to me that Google never figured it out. If you go back into go back in time a little bit, Google has never dominated when it came to anything podcast related. It was, if you looked at, Google Podcasts, which was their dedicated app for podcasting that they just deprecated earlier this year, that app generally never got more than 4 or 5% market share globally. And I always thought, it's like, man, Google, you should be killing it here. But what Google figured out is that, oh, wait a minute, we have people who are listening to podcasts, not just watching, but listening on our platform. Let's go ahead and lean into that. So we've talked about this.
So let me ask you, is when you say more people are listening, quote unquote, I'm using air quotes here, on YouTube, are they still listening to content that has a video component? Because I feel like the video piece is also something that Apple dropped the ball on and could use to get back up in the rankings, if you will. But are people on YouTube just listening to some sort of audio feed, or are they just listening and not actually paying attention to the video?
Right.
It's both. It's both. So here's what's been happening. Podcasting during the pandemic started shifting from everything was just audio to where a lot of people, I got plenty of time, I'm sitting at the house in front of this webcam, let me just go ahead and record this thing and throw it up as a YouTube video. They were creating regular YouTube channels and taking their audio podcasts they were, they now have a video component for, and just throwing it up, similar to what we do. Terrance has been sticking our show up on YouTube long before YouTube allowed you to ingest RSS and all that kind of stuff. And, so we actually are putting video up. So that was happening. But what you had were people were taking their, they were going to their, their MP3s that they would have for their podcast that were just audio only, converting those files to MP4s and just throwing a static image up and putting their podcast on YouTube as a YouTube channel. And massive numbers of people are listening to podcasts that way. So you literally would go, you see nothing but a, maybe podcast artwork, or it might be, they may, for a particular episode, they might have put a picture up of the guest or something like that. And you just listen to the whole thing and go do whatever it is that you do. So that's been happening really going back to the beginning of the pandemic through now.
So it's still, I'm just, for my own clarification. So it's still just a YouTube channel. YouTube does not have any separate podcast area.
No, they do
where
now.
Where people
They do.
They do now.
But is anybody taking advantage of that? Like, I think,
yes.
is everybody just doing what we do, which is throw the video up, and you can watch the video. And even if you just putting a static image over it, you're literally just watching audio basically on a YouTube channel.
So the answer is both are happening. So up until relatively recently, there was a fair amount of work you would have to do. You would have to take your MP3 that you would upload to your podcast host. Like we use, we use Acast for our show. That's where we're hosted. That's where our MP3 goes. You'd have to take that MP3 file, convert that to an MP4, create a YouTube channel, then go manually upload every episode of your show to YouTube, just like you would any other YouTube channel, just for the audio piece. There were people who were doing that. And what Google started to understand and figure out was that there are massive numbers of people who are listening to these audio only shows on YouTube, a video only platform. So what Google did, what they said is like, you know what? Here's how we can get into the podcasting game and make some money doing it. Let's make it easy for anyone with a podcast to put their RSS feed directly into YouTube. And we go and just grab their shows based off of their release frequency. So now you don't have to convert your file to an MP3. You don't have to do all this stuff. You literally need to upload your podcast artwork one time, add in your RSS feed, and Google will then go and pull your show into their platform. They'll do the conversion of the file and then play it as an MP4 right there in YouTube. And for folks who do that, they even get an additional tab in their YouTube view that actually says podcast now. So Google has made it relatively easy to do this. And I am of the mind at this point that if you have an audio first podcast, or you have an audio only podcast, if you're not even doing video, there is no reason that you should not put that up on YouTube. Why? Because YouTube is just another distribution channel to where you're going to get significantly more people to come and listen to your show, because the trends are that's where people like to listen. And then also, if you were doing doing it the long way before, one of the reasons that people did it was because Google has search. The problem for podcasting has been for years that there is no algorithm that drives people to a show, that drives virality of a particular show. That is not the case for YouTube. YouTube is the second largest search engine on the planet. So if you put your show there and people search for it, they're going to, your keywords there, they're going to generally find you just like they would if they were doing a Google search for a website. So that's one of the reasons why people were doing it. And like I said, Google has just now leaned into it. Now, I say all this to say this. I hate YouTube Music. I think that application is a horrible app for a podcast. And I hope that Google will improve it. But that being said, getting your show up on YouTube simply just makes sense because you get all the benefits now of the YouTube search.
And I don't know, man. I just went on YouTube, on the YouTube app, and the podcast, there's a tab there for podcasts, but it still seems video first. Not necessarily just the content, but if I'm watching a video, I'm expecting a different UX. When I'm listening to a podcast or searching for podcasters, to me personally, I'm expecting a different user experience. And because YouTube podcasts is a tab within the YouTube app, it's still kind of missing the mark on being able to, and maybe, and it's maybe because again, I'm biased because I've always had Apple Podcasts and I'm used to going into the podcast app and using it differently than I would trying to find music on YouTube, for example, or podcasts or whatever the case may be. So there's still a little bit left to be seen, even though, yes, there are a ton of people, gobs of people who are listening to podcasts on YouTube. I think Google still needs to come on and come up with a better user experience for people who are only looking for podcasts on YouTube.
Oh, there's no doubt about that. And we could do an entire show. I could literally carry an entire show by myself on my disdain for YouTube music. YouTube music for music, I guess, is all right. I don't use it on Spotify, but for podcasts, it is just not a great interface. That being said, but still, most people.
Yeah, it sounds like they're just capitalizing off of the fact that so many people use YouTube anyway.
Right. And
why wouldn't you, make it a little bit more easy to incorporate podcasts into that mix? That just makes sense for them.
It really does,
that's
because
where all the people are.
At the end of the day, one of the things they want to do is just like people who are on YouTube with their videos. Ultimately, they want to get monetized when they get enough download hours or watch hours. I guess in this case, it would be listen hours and enough subscribers, and you can monetize. It'll be the same thing for podcasts. So that's just Google's ability to make more money, which goes back to your point, Steph, that Apple, maybe one of the reasons that they're doing this is because they've never tried to make money off of it. So, when you are trying to monetize something, you do tend to pay attention more to the platform as compared to, well, we're just gonna put this out there and let people have their way with it.
You think? So. And this would just be a nice time to remind everybody to subscribe to the Tech Jawn on YouTube and download wherever you get your podcasts.
Absolutely. So, y'all, there is a issue that is going on right now where the prices of everything is too high: groceries, car insurance, and rent. But here is the thing: it looks like there is a company that is allowing landlords to, through the use of this application that I guess it kind of aggregates data, to collude with each other to price their rental properties up. Steph, I believe this is one you stuck in. Why don't you tell us what's going on here?
Yeah, so the company is called RealPage, and the Justice Department and 8 attorneys general from 8 different states are suing RealPage for rent gouging software. Basically, they're suing the algorithm pretty much. So RealPage is a company that provides software to landlords that aggregates rent pricing information, and then is supposed to just sort of recommend what you should be charging for rent in your area based on whatever factors.
Numbers, right.
Yeah, all these different factors. But what it looks like it is doing, number one, they're suing on the basis of a monopoly, because RealPage has 80% of the nation's market share in this particular industry. So, I mean, that there's that. But also that your some landlords are getting recommendations automatically generated for them, automatically pushed to them without actually taking anything else into consideration as they're setting their rent pricing. And I think the price fixing that they say is happening by the algorithm because of the information that they are able to get from each individual landlord that's supposed to be secret, I suppose, is causing a price fixing situation for people who are trying to rent. I hope I explained that. It was a little confusing or I read a couple different articles, and I'm like, I'm still trying to understand like what the software is doing that is precluding the landlords from setting fair rents. And it looks like they are not taking, like, for instance, if you get a month free, the first month free, we'll waive your security deposit and you get your first month free. Or if a landlord might look at someone's application necessarily and see, well, you got a couple little things. However, I'm looking at you and I'm having a conversation with you face to face, I'm going to rent to you anyway because of this. Maybe the software is kicking people out, potential renters, and also setting prices that make it prohibitive for a lot of people.
And it's stopping, not stopping, it's reducing the amount of competition per landlord. For example, if I'm looking for an apartment, I go across the street, I fill out an application, they tell me how much it costs. I go across the street, fill out an application, like most renters do. You're looking for an apartment, you find an area, you pretty much put an application on every single apartment or home for rent in that area. If all of them are using RealPage,
Right.
and all of them are just accepting what RealPage says or recommends as the amount, then no matter where I go in the neighborhood, if they're all
I can't afford to live there.
I can't, because the company, the landlords are all accepting what RealPage is doing or saying. So therefore, there's no competition between apartment complexes or homes, because if I go to one and, like you said, first rent's free, if you get security deposit back, yada yada yada. If nobody's doing that, because they don't have to be competitive, because we're all using the same thing.
Right.
It's just like, all right, well, there's no it's anti-competitive and all those things.
That's the way I meant to
landlords.
explain it.
Yeah, it allows them to price
fixing,
fix. The price fixing.
Yeah.
So
that's what I meant to say.
so yes, like Terrance, like you just said it. So here's what it is. Landlord A puts all their information into the system. Landlord B puts all their information into the system. C and D do. Now, I think that RealPage is 80%. So there's E is the only one that's not doing it. Well, with those 4 companies that are doing it, well, we now know what you're charging for rent. We now know the specials that you're running. Let's all do that. And it's not even the landlords that are colluding with each other. The software is saying, hey, based off of what information we have, here's what you should be doing. Here's what you should be doing.
Here's how you too can collude to fix the price.
So
I want to read a quick thing in here. In a competitive marketplace, each landlord may independently decide to offer concessions so that it can better compete in enticing lessors, the complaint alleges. But again, RealPage seeks to replace fully independent, competitive decision-making with collective action by ending concessions. So that, basically they're price fixing. And I was like, man, it's funny though. I was like, do I need to go on RealPage? I am a landlord.
There you go. There you go.
Like, do I need to be on RealPage right now, making sure my rent is where it should be?
All right, don't be part of the problem now.
This is a folks are going to say, oh, this is an AI issue, and yeah, technically, yes, it could be. It's big data issues. The fact that when you can collect all the data, put all the data into a database, and then run comparisons and look and see what's happening, and where the data points were created. Here this was landlord A, this is landlord B, this is landlord C, this is landlord D. Let's do a promotion to those 4 landlords that are using our system to let them know, it's like, hey, this is what really would work based off of our metrics in your area. And the landlords was like, okay, you mean to tell me I can rent this apartment out without having to do the first month free? Cool, let's do that. And it works because if no one else is doing it, there's now not an incentive for you to do it. But the thing is, the company is the one who told you not to do it. And the company, RealPage being the company, and they have all of everyone's, or at least 80% of people's information, so they can, as we said, price fix.
So. And considering rents have gone up 35% over the past 5 years, we don't need anything else raising rents and making housing more unaffordable for people in this country. So yeah, they need to look at this and do something.
And they need to do it fast, man, because just rent is
the rent is too damn high.
It is too damn, and it's like now is when you have the conversations about, why would I own a home when I got to do this and that? And before it was kind of like, well, rent is a little bit cheaper. Now if it's up here, it's like, well, I'll just rent. I ain't got time. I ain't got to deal with plumbing issues. I ain't got to deal with bugs. I ain't got to deal with, especially if it's the same price. Why I'm gonna go through all that and save up this down payment and qualify for all this when
the rent is right there. You don't. There's no incentive. So. They hopefully we'll see something come out of this where, people get a little bit of relief because the rent is too damn high.
So, y'all, I think it is safe to say that none of us were really big fans of Elon Musk buying Twitter back in the day, a couple years back. I don't think any of us were big fans of it. But you know who's not a big fan of it right now? The banks that lent that dude all the money, because
and the celebrities too, all the people.
Yeah.
There's a whole bunch of people that put some money up for that nonsense.
Yeah. So for those who don't remember, Elon Musk paid $44 billion for Twitter. That he then renamed to X, a company that is now worth $12.5 billion. Now, I'm not a math savant or anything like that, but if I do 44 minus 12, that's 36, I think. No, what is it? 44 minus 12, that's 32. $32 billion, $32.5 billion, $31.5 billion you've lost in a couple of years.
And then to make the matter worse, and I'm pretty sure you're gonna get to it, the banks is what they used to do with the subprime, with the mortgages, right? The whole housing market thing. The banks would get these crazy loans and package them up and sell them to another bank.
Yep.
They would package it up, sell it to another bank,
Right.
on and on and on until the everything fell out, right? What the banks can't even do now is package up Elon's debt and pass it off, because the underlying asset, Twitter, is worth so much less than how much he owes.
Yes.
They can't even pass this off on
They
nobody.
Can't even pass it off.
For real.
Banks can't even do what banks do because of how
Right.
bad this deal was.
So this is my Tech Jawn notebook. I put all my notes for each episode in here, and I do number them by topic or whatever. This is what I put for
worst ever. That's all y'all
That's
get.
what y'all get.
That's what y'all get.
That's all I got. That's what y'all mofos get, because y'all knew this man was not some genius businessman that was gonna take Twitter and turn it into this money-making gold mine. Y'all knew this shit.
And
y'all
they knew Twitter wasn't worth $44 billion.
Y'all
They knew it wasn't
Twitter
worth
was not
$44
worth $44 billion. Y'all knew all of this, but y'all let this white man who, y'all think is just the greatest, most genius person since Tony Stark, who's a fictional character, and y'all threw a bag of money, buckets of money at this man, wheelbarrowed money up to his doorstep and dumped it on the doorstep, thinking he was going to save Twitter and become this thing, and y'all played yourselves, and that's what y'all get.
Citing data from PitchBook, the Wall Street Journal said that Twitter ranks as the biggest hung deal since the turmoil that followed the collapse of Lehman Brothers. We're talking about a big, giant investment bank that went out of business some 16 years ago, and one of the largest hung deals of all time. So this isn't just a bad deal lately. They're saying that this Twitter deal is one of the worst deals that banks have done in the history of banking.
Listen, I don't feel bad for none of y'all. For Diddy, because apparently he was a investor, Jack Dorsey, all y'all clowns knew that this was going to blow up in your faces like it did. And so, you get what you get.
I'll take the opposite. I don't think they knew that it was going to blow up in their faces. I think that they thought, like they always did, they thought they was going to make money off of it, which is why they did it. They thought, oh, here's what we're going to do. Let's go ahead and get this dude this money. And as soon as we do, it's Twitter, it's Elon Musk. Everybody loves him. We're going to be able to sell that debt. It's like, nah, son. It's like, we learned from the financial crisis that no, you can't be trusting these banks like this. So somebody thought this was a good idea, but no, they got. And as I said, I feel sorry for anyone who's working at these banks that might be adversely affected by this. But as far as the banks are concerned, it's like this dude took a company that wasn't worth 44. I think the numbers that they were saying, it was worth more like 28 to 32. But let's go ahead and give him his money. It's Elon, and we're going to do what we do. And now you have basically created the worst deal for yourselves since the financial crisis. And I'm just like,
and shout out to them, the people on Twitter's board that was fighting to keep the number at 44 billion instead of letting them take it back down, because Elon was trying to back out of the deal. And they were like, nah, man.
No.
You signed the paperwork.
Like, I'm Elon Musk. I'm going to pay 44 billion for y'all. All right, bet. Here you go.
Uh-huh.
Paperwork side is good. Well, hold up. I thought y'all was going to argue with me. Nope, no argument here. The only argument is that you cannot get out of this deal. We gonna go ahead and take that money because they knew that the company was not worth $44 billion. They're like, let's take this money and run.
And it's going to happen again, and it's going to happen again. The housing crash apparently didn't teach any lessons,
and he's still gonna be rich, and the rest of us still gonna be doing whatever we doing, and it's insane.
It's on vibes only.
Right.
Right. For us, if we were to tank a $44 billion company like this, it would be the end of us. We would no longer be able to do anything in business.
We ain't getting the money, Jack. Let me tell you. Let me give you an example.
First of all, to even
me and my wife are in the car buying process, right? And before we locked down our credit because they was still in the credit, Social Security and credit cards, right? We had looked at our credit. You can go on the little services and get your credit from 3 scores or whatever the case may be. So then we're like, all right, bet. So then we, reach out to some dealerships. We didn't have everybody run our credit, but we picked one that we kind of going in this directions, right? So we let them run our credit. They came back with a whole nother number, and we was like, wait a minute, where that number come from?
Right.
We thought, according to our credit scores, that it's that and it's that and the third. They were like, no, well, see, you got to understand, for car loans and mortgage, we look at a different type of credit card score. I'm like, no, wait a minute.
Right. So
what y'all gonna tell us? Number one,
and number two, a different score.
The score is the score. Why I got to look at all? Y'all got to it was like a Vantage 8 and a Vantage 5 and a this and that and the third and the FICO this. And it's like, come on, man.
Right.
My point is, we had to go through all that just for our car dealership to tell us, all right, well, y'all owe this much. So I can imagine trying to do the same thing to buy Twitter. They're like, man, get out of here.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's like I said, they knew that this company wasn't worth this, yet they still went ahead with this deal. So it's like it's hard to feel bad for them. That's not true.
No,
it's not hard. It's not hard. It's actually easy
at all.
It's like
super easy.
Yeah, it's like it's like
super
easy. This one was like just kind of funny to me, and we talked about this on previous episodes. But the Linda Yaccarino, she's now running. She's running X. They're suing.
Sure, she is.
Yeah. She's not. She's the CEO.
She's been given the title.
She is the CEO.
CEO.
And
the title.
At some point, like there are people who are wagering on how long is she going to be able to just say, you know what, it's not even worth the money anymore. I'm out. I'm going to go ahead and dip because she's now looking foolish. And before this, she wasn't
to fall on their sword.
Yeah. So,
and she's the one that's going to have to fall on her sword when this is all said and done.
But it's
and not Elon Musk.
Can you imagine running a company where the owner of the company says, and I'm paraphrasing, but he basically told advertisers, F y'all, I don't want your money. And they said, okay, bet. And literally that's what they did. And now, oh, wait a minute. Y'all thought I was serious. I was just joking. I was just, using expletives to call you out your name, right to your face as you're sitting there in the audience watching me talk about you. I wasn't really serious about that. And now they are suing advertising, nonprofits for colluding to do illegal, what do they call them? Illegal boycotts. It's like, dude got up on stage and told Earth to basically, an expletive
handed them his ass
tirade.
to kiss.
And
basically,
they was like, okay, it's like, what company would want to, if you were telling me, if I'm saying, do not give me money, you such and such and such and such. And then I say, okay, why would you be upset or shocked that I'm not doing it? That's who is at the head of this company. You have people who are just, it's like, these are just not serious people. It seems like in many cases.
Right. Very unserious.
In this case, in another case, dude also runs SpaceX. And SpaceX is basically going to bail out Boeing. I know we didn't have this in the notes, but I don't know if y'all heard this.
Yeah, no, I did.
Where, there were some astronauts.
Poor Boeing.
Yeah, this is not a good look
Yo,
for them.
Boeing is catching an
It's not
L
a good look for you.
because I would be up in space like if y'all don't get me back home like
I don't care
today,
who it is.
right?
They were
Like,
supposed to be
come
up there for
on,
8
man,
days. They've been up there for like
yo,
82 or something.
and still ain't coming back till next year.
Yeah. So well, here's the reason, because like they, Boeing and Boeing and SpaceX use different type of connectors for their spacesuits. So it's just like they're gonna be up there for a minute. They were supposed to be up there for 8 days.
That's crazy.
This does not look good at all for Boeing. And it like I just feel like right now, like you referred to Elon Musk as Tony Stark. Is he got like a white Pomeranian? He's just petting it right now, just smiling and grinning about got him. It's like the U.S. government has no choice but to get astronauts home on SpaceX. Now, like I said, SpaceX is not X.
It had to be them.
SpaceX is not, SpaceX is not X. It's just and technically the owner of one is the CEO of another company. So I do want to say SpaceX is doing some wonderful work. I actually know some people who work there, believe it or not. And it's just like the CEO is just like, a lot of people just have a distaste for them. But yeah, can you imagine if you're Boeing right now and you fly your spaceship up there? You fly your spaceship up there, literally, and thrusters don't work. I mean, they're able safely to get to the space station, but NASA doesn't trust y'all to bring them home. So we're gonna go and Elon, can you go and build us a rocket, please, to get our people home?
Astronaut, like I wanted to be an astronaut like bad, but that's the only thing. Like you get up there,
I done seen too many movies
and they can't get you back, and it's just like
too many movies where folks are stuck in space to where in real life I'm like, no,
in
thank
space.
you.
Yes.
I ain't saying that I was in the program to be some aerospace superstar or anything like that, but at the same time, the way my anxiety is set up, I'm like you're not about to have me out here.
I was close, man. I was close. I was right there, in those NASA facilities, like watching those launches real time, and just got caught up in the fabulosity of it all, and the coolness of it all. And I was just like, yeah. But man, I cannot imagine being on a space station right now, like stuck. Like literally stuck. That's crazy.
I think I've talked about this on the show, but y'all know I went to space camp when I was 12 or 13, right? I've told that story on here before.
Yes, vaguely.
But anyway, I will never, because I wanted to be an astronaut. I mean, I'm still into space. I read and I look at a lot of this stuff, but I had a dude just tell me, he's like, hey, bro, it's like you 12 or 13 years old and you already 6'1". The chances of you getting noticed, and you look like when it's all said and done, you're gonna be about 6'4", 6'5", 300 pounds. You ain't going to space no time soon.
As big as you've gotten would have probably precluded it, but I don't know that your height would have been a deal breaker. I mean, I think about like a Leland Melvin, like he's pretty tall. Mm-hmm. So and he played football actually. Yeah. So I mean, he wasn't he wasn't no defensive tackle though. He wasn't a defensive tackle, right? But he definitely was a sizable dude. Yeah. So I don't know that it would have been a complete.
Yeah, I just like. I mean, it's like it broke my heart because it's like. Oh, this is just what I want to do.
12-year-old dream.
And like the dude just told me, is like you're already taller than all the astronauts. And you're a big kid. I mean, I graduated high school 285, 290 pounds. It's like, I'm defensive tackle. So it's like, I love basketball, but I was built for football. So I know what I do. But I will never forget that. So I do pay attention to this stuff. It's just like, man, it's like, two companies that's doing this. Boeing and SpaceX. That's the only ones that's doing it. And crazy. You got them there, and NASA said, you know what? And this just happened this weekend. This just happened. They just made this decision Saturday. It's like, you know what? We don't trust that you can get our people home. That's so crazy. We can't take the chance that something happens and we lose some astronauts on some commercial stuff. That can never happen. So we're going to go with this other company. And even though they got to go build a spaceship for us, build some new spacesuits for us, we could
Right.
go ahead and just let our people just stay up there a few months longer and let this other company go and do it. That
And the
cannot
amount
look
of
good for
money
Boeing at
that
all.
is getting spent, and just it's not a good look.
Yeah, it's like,
Not a
I
good look.
know this because this decision just happened on Saturday. I know first thing this morning there was all kind of LinkedIn updates on people's resumes and stuff like that, see if they can go get a job over SpaceX, because I just can't imagine this going well for Boeing at all.
Mm-mm.
But y'all, we're getting towards the end of the show, getting towards the top of the hour here. So Steph, you put a spotlight in here that I'm excited to hear you talk about. This
Yes,
young man named Herman. Is it
it's Heman.
Heman? Okay, Heman
Heman Bekele.
Bekele. Okay. So
Yes.
tell us about the Time Kid of the Year.
Yes. So Heman Bekele whipped up the most dangerous of what he calls his potions when he was just over 7 years old. He'd been conducting his own science experiments for about 3 years by that point, mixing up whatever he could get his hands on at home and waiting to see if the resulting goo would turn into anything. These days, a whole lot of people are paying him a whole lot of attention. Last October, the 3M Company and Discovery Education selected Heman, a rising 10th grader at Woodson High School in Fairfax County, Virginia, as the winner of its Young Scientist Challenge. His prize, $25,000. His accomplishment, inventing a soap that could one day treat and even prevent multiple forms of skin cancer. It may take years before such a product comes to market, but this summer, Heman is already spending part of every weekday working in a lab at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health in Baltimore, hoping to bring his dream to fruition. When school is in session, he'll be there less often, but will continue to plug away. Quote, I'm really passionate about skin cancer research, he says. Whether it's my own research or what's happening in the field, it's absolutely incredible to think that one day my bar of soap will be able to make a direct impact on somebody else's life. That's the reason I started this all in the first place. It's that ambition, to say nothing of that selflessness, that has earned Heman recognition as Time's Kid of the Year for 2024. Born in Addis Ababa before immigrating to the US with his family when he was 4, Heman recalls that some of his earliest memories were of seeing laborers working in the blistering sun, usually with no protection for their skin. His parents taught him and his sisters, Hesette, now 16, and Leah, now 7, to cover up, and explained the dangers of too much time outdoors without sunscreen or proper clothing. It didn't take too long for him to start thinking about how he might help. A few years ago, he read about imiquimod, I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that right, imiquimod, a drug that, among other uses, is approved to fight one form of skin cancer and has shown promise against several more. Typically, imiquimod, which can help destroy tumors and usually comes in the form of a cream, is prescribed as a frontline drug as part of a broader cancer treatment plan. But Heman wondered if it could be made available more easily to people in the earliest stages of the disease. A bar of soap, he reckoned, might be just the delivery system for such a life-saving drug, not because it was simple, but because it would be a lot more affordable than the $40,000 it typically costs for skin cancer treatment. There was a long way to go between inspiration and application, however. Executing on his idea was more complicated than simply mixing the drug into an ordinary bar of soap, since any therapeutic power the imiquimod might confer would just be washed down the drain with the suds. The answer was to combine the soap with a lipid-based nanoparticle that would linger on the skin when the soap was washed away, much the way moisturizer or fragrance can stay behind after the suds are rinsed off. There was only so much brainstorming Heman could do on his own, however. Then in 2023, he came across a 3M challenge and submitted a video explaining his idea. Soon, he received an invite to the company's HQ in St. Paul, Minnesota, to deliver a pitch in front of a panel of judges. Before that day was out, he'd been named the winner. The $25,000 prize he knew would go a long way toward helping him afford to pursue his research, but he'd still need a professional lab in which to conduct the work. That opportunity arrived in February when he attended a networking event hosted by the Melanoma Research Alliance in Washington, D.C. There he met Vito Rebecca, a molecular biologist and assistant professor at Johns Hopkins in Baltimore. He credits his family, particularly his parents, for setting the stage for his achievements. His mother, Mulumabet, I'm butchering these names, I apologize, is a teacher. His father, Wanwosen, is a human resources specialist for the U.S. Agency for International Development. The example of their sacrifice, coming to an unfamiliar country in service of their children's education, has imbued him with a love of learning and a commitment to pursuing the improbable or even the seemingly impossible. Nor are his parents and Rebecca the only adults stewarding him on his long scientific journey. He is also aided by Deborah Isabel, his mentor from 3M. For all of this, Heman remains humble about what he's accomplished in just 15 years. Anybody could do what I did, he says. I just came up with an idea. I worked toward that idea, and I was able to bring it to life. But he confesses that he worries too. Scientific breakthroughs seem to be coming faster and faster in medicine, in engineering, and artificial intelligence, and he frets that people may have reached something of a saturation point. A lot of people have this mindset that everything's been done, there's nothing left for me to do, he says. To anybody having that thought, I'd say we'll never run out of ideas in this world. Just keep inventing, keep thinking of new ways to improve our world, and keep making it a better place.
So I just want to make sure I read this correctly. This young fella's 15 and just started 10th grade. Like high school in America, 10th grade, right?
Regular high school.
Yeah. It's amazing how geniuses' minds work. He was thinking of this stuff when he was 3 or 4 years old. Started doing these experiments when he moved here at 4, creating, literally dealing with chemicals that he's got under his bed, unbeknownst to his parents. They figured it out when he almost burned the house down.
About to burn the house down with some sodium hydrochloride and a little bit of this and a little bit of that.
But it's like, but instead of just probably, I'm sorry, he probably was not feeling him that day when he almost burned the house down. But it's like, okay, let's channel him in the right direction and figure out how we can let this curiosity blossom. So what do? They get him a chemistry set, and and like I said, now he is Times Kid of the Year, and like I'm just tripping over this. He just started the 10th grade. He's not even old enough to get a driver's permit yet, not let alone driver's license. He's not 15 and a half yet. He's not even old enough to get a permit. He just started the 10th grade, and he's out there doing this kind of stuff. So
hopefully, all that work he's putting in for when he does get a license, he'll be able to afford his car insurance.
Right.
Something tells me that man is going to be one of those folks. He's probably going to have a driver driving him back and forth to where he needs to get to. It's like we don't want you driving.
Mad at that either.
Sit in the back and just think about stuff. Protect him
in the back. That's right. Stuff.
Yeah. So y'all, it's good, Steph, to have you back. I know you were out. You were out for 3 weeks, so it seems like it's forever. I know. Since you've last been here.
Back,
but
baby.
Hope you enjoyed your vacation and stuff like that. But it's time to get on out of here. So Tech Life Steph, tell folks how they can get at you.
They can follow me all around the web at Tech Life Steph, or check out my website at stephaniehumphrey.com.
And you can find me all over the internet at Brother Tech. That's BROTHATECH.
And I am at Robb Dunewood on all the things. And we are also at the Tech Jawn on all the things. And one last thing, if you would like to support the Tech Jawn, one of the best ways to do so is by heading over to thetechjawn.com/Patreon, where you can become a patron and support the show. We've got multiple tiers over there. Any one of them gets you access to our live stream and after party. And anything you do goes a long way to help us bring this tech to you the way that we bring it to you. So that being said, we're going to go ahead and get out of here. We'll holler at you when we holler. Peace.
Peace.